Asian women are much more likely than Asian men to marry outside their race, and white men are increasingly more likely than white women to marry outside their race. White male Asian female couples make up 11% of all interracial marriages in the United States, according to a 2015 Pew Research study, which makes it the third most common pairing behind white male Hispanic female couples and Hispanic male white female couples. And when you take into account the fact that there are more than 3 times as many Hispanic people residing in the US than there are Asian people, it's easy to see that white men and Asian women are choosing to pair up at disproportionate rates. Now, from the Asian women's perspective, it makes perfect sense that so many of them would date white men because white men are the most populous group of men in the country. So, just statistically speaking, you would expect lots of women of every race to date or marry white men. Not even necessarily due to preference, but just because of how the numbers add up. Although, yeah, white men in general are the most preferred race of men for most women, so that is a factor, but even if it wasn't, you would still expect to see a significant portion of Asian women ending up with white men. But when you look at things from the white man's perspective, well, Asian women are one of the smallest minority groups in the United States, so clearly it seems to be the case that a large number of white men are specifically choosing to date Asian women. So why is that? And by the way, I'm not just going to be talking statistics and numbers in this video. I do have some real life tales of white women mauling over Asian women. So if you're one of my viewers that just watches my videos for my personal stories, then stick around because I got some good stuff coming up for you too. So when it comes to the question of why so many white men prefer Asian women, some of the reasons you hear most often are that it's because Asian women have a reputation of being more submissive, or it's because of the popularity of anime and Japanese video games, or even just that white men are all evil colonizers that want to control Asian women. But there's another explanation that I think makes a lot more sense. And it's really a pretty simple thing. In the United States, 40% of white women are obese. 44% of Hispanic women are obese. And for black women, the rate is a whopping 57%. So, what do you think the obesity rate is for Asian women? 17% of Asian women in the United States are obese. 17%. That's less than half the rate of white women, which is the second least obese category. So when white men are walking around, going about their day-to-day lives, scoping out the scene, checking out all the young ladies and all the different types of ladies, it might not be something that they explicitly take note of, but Asian women do tend to be less fat, which means Asian women do tend to be more attractive than every other group of women. So men notice, hey, a large portion of these Asian chicks are hot. You know what? I think I like Asian women. Because, by the way, if there are any women listening to this, something you need to understand is that as long as you are not fat, then most men will probably find you attractive. And it's not that overweight women or even obese women in some cases can't be attractive, because there definitely are some hot girls out there that are overweight, but that's an exception. And in most cases, when an overweight woman is attractive, that's usually in spite of her weight, not because of it. Most women would be more attractive if they were not overweight. So take another look at those numbers. 40% of white women are not just overweight, but obese. And only 17% of Asian women are obese. So I think it is fair to say, generally speaking, Asian women are more than twice as attractive as white women. And listen, men are attracted to feminine women, just like women are attracted to masculine men. And physically, what makes a person look feminine? It's their body shape, their proportions. You know, things like how wide a woman's hips are compared to her waist, for example. But obesity tends to make people's bodies more spherical, if anything. All the fat just kind of smooths out the feminine proportions, and it makes women look less feminine. And obesity has the same effect on men too. It changes their body proportions in a way that makes them appear more androgynous. And in cases when a fat woman is attractive, it's usually because her fat is distributed in such a way on her body that proportionately her body shape still looks feminine. And in some cases, being slightly overweight might even make certain women appear more feminine if she just has a very fortunate fat distribution. Like if most of her fat goes to her butt and breasts, then that might make her look more feminine to be a little bit fat. But in 99% of cases, with 99% of women, being fat decreases their femininity, making them less attractive. So I really think that is the main reason why white men love Asian women so much. And it's not a bad reason at all. Obesity causes all sorts of health problems, and it can also cause issues with childbirth. So maybe those health reasons are playing a role too, subconsciously, but for the most part, women that are not overweight are the most feminine and the most attractive. So if you're a man in the United States and you're forced to choose, say there's a panel of buttons in front of you and you can only press one button and each button represents a different race, okay, and whichever button you press, you get one random woman of that race selected at random from the existing US population, and that woman will love you and bear your children and she'll be your wife, basically. And you're forced to spend the rest of your life with that woman. Okay, so obviously this is a fantastical, magic, hypothetical, but either way, which button do you think you should press, knowing all the statistics about obesity? It's a no-brainer. Most men of all races, not even just white men, most men, if they understand the data, they are going to press the button that gives them a random Asian woman. And you'd be ignorant to press any other button, because any other button would give you a roughly 50% chance of getting a fat, obese cow, a beast of a woman, a real heifer. But the Asian button is most likely to give you an actual slim, feminine woman. So it's an easy choice. And while we're talking about buttons, I don't usually do this, but I would really appreciate it if you would click on that like button or maybe even the subscribe button. But that's up to you. And I do think there's something to be said about the upbringing and the cultural values and the mental and emotional stability of an obese woman versus a woman of a healthy weight. Looks is a huge component of what goes into attraction. It's easily, by far, the most important component, but it's also safe to assume that a woman of normal weight is probably more attractive personality-wise too. Like, women of healthy weight have more inner beauty and inner femininity as well as more physical beauty. And that might be a relatively small portion of the overall calculus a man's brain is using when he computes how attractive he finds any given woman, but it probably does contribute to some degree. So to me, it just seems obvious why white men are going for Asian women at rapidly increasing rates, and I'm sure white women do understand it deep down, because it's not like you actually need to see the data to notice these things. You can just go out into public or look around on social media, and it's clear as day that Asian women are slimmer and more feminine and more attractive than every other race. But man, if you have ever seen how white women react when they see a white man with an Asian woman, it's just primal. I mean, they really can't stand it. It makes them, they're seething about it. And of course, I'm saying this as a matter of generality, okay? I know that there are some white women out there that don't hulk out at the thought of Asian women taking their men. And usually those are the actually feminine white women, because they do exist. But yeah, it's crazy. So a couple weeks ago, I was sitting in the living room at my mom's house with my mom and my aunt, and they were talking about this guy that I went to high school with. And I don't really know him that well. He's a couple years older than me. And, I just didn't really talk to anybody much in high school. So basically, I know who the guy is, but I don't know him on a personal level. But he's a big church guy, goes to church every Sunday. And my mom and my aunt both go to the same church as this guy, although my mom doesn't really go that often. But either way, my mom and my aunt know the guy from church, and I know of him from high school. And my mom has talked to me about this guy before. I'm not really sure where she gets all her information, because I'm pretty sure this guy didn't tell my mom all of this directly. So everything I'm hearing about this situation, it's being filtered through the church lady gossip pipeline. So take that for what it is. Take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. But basically, the story is this guy was married to a white woman for a few years, and I've seen pictures of her. She's actually pretty good looking, but they got married young in their early 20s, and after a few years, tale as old as time, suddenly his wife wants a divorce. So they get divorced, and again, tale as old as time, within like 2 weeks of the divorce being finalized, this woman is in a new relationship. With who? None other than one of her coworkers, of course. So she probably was cheating on her husband for a while before they got divorced. And it's funny because I guess they actually met at the church, because my mom knows the ex-wife too. But she said after they got divorced, the ex-wife started going to a different church, but the rest of her family, like her parents and her siblings, all still go to the same church as her ex-husband, the same church my mom and my aunt go to. So anyways, I've been hearing about all this drama for years as it's been developing, because the divorce was, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years ago. And every now and then my mom will tell me some more gossip about this guy and his ex-wife and all of the drama involved. But anyways, so after they got divorced, this guy eventually started to try dating again, and I guess he was really struggling a lot with it. Although, from what I hear, he did get some dates through the apps, so obviously he wasn't struggling as bad as most of us, but I guess relative to his expectations, he was struggling. And of course, his ex had gotten remarried in less than a year after their divorce to her coworker that she was cheating on him with. So, I'm sure that makes things a lot harder. Oh, and this isn't really an important detail, I guess, but apparently this guy, up until recently, he was still sharing custody of his dog with his ex-wife. So he would get the dog for a week or whatever it is. Then his ex-wife would show up at his house with her new husband to pick up the dog for the next week. So this guy was actually frequently communicating with his ex-wife and the man that she left him for just to share custody of their dog. So I don't know. I would probably just let her have the dog if it was me in that situation, but hey, I guess he really loved that dog. Or maybe he was just, desperately hanging on to the hope that he could get the girl back. So he wanted to see her as often as possible. I don't know. I don't know what it is. It just seems like a really weird situation. Um, but I can only assume that if you're seeing your ex-wife and the man she cheated on you with on a regular basis, that's got to be pretty bad for your mental health. But anyways, yeah, so this guy was struggling for a few years after the divorce, and I would say he's a pretty average looking guy, but I think he's some kind of engineer, so he's probably makes pretty good money. And from back in high school, like I said, I didn't know him personally, but what I did know about him is that he was a part of the nerdy, goody two shoes, church going crowd. So he's a very straight laced kind of guy, not fat, average looking in the face, in his mid 30s, or actually late 30s. So, according to Andrew Tate, this man should be at his peak. But, anyways, so eventually, at some point, about maybe like 2 years ago, my mom tells me that she found out this guy is specifically seeking out Asian women. And he went to great lengths. Like, he started taking Korean language classes, and he even. So, this is actually pretty extreme, if you ask me. But apparently, this guy actually went on vacation to Korea, and the reason he told people why he was going was to see some K-pop group that he likes. And that probably tells you all you need to know about this guy as far as what he's like. He's a 30-something-year-old man that openly admits to enjoying K-pop. So, yeah. And again, this is all gossip, so who knows how true this is, but the story is that this guy was taking Korean language lessons with an online tutor, a female tutor, and he constructed this whole story about going to Korea for a concert just so he could try to meet up with his tutor in person. And honestly, I believe it because I don't even think it's really too far-fetched. It's just like a very targeted version of geomaxing. But yeah, so I guess this guy planned a whole trip to Korea just so he could say to his tutor, "Oh, hey, by the way, I'm going to be in Seoul in a few weeks. You want to meet up?" And from what I'm told, the tutor was acting like she was going to actually meet up with this guy, but then she ghosted him at the last minute. So, if we are to believe that this story is true, this man concocted an entire trip to Korea just so he could try to meet this one Korean woman that he kinda knew, and he didn't even plan with her before planning the trip. He just planned the trip just so he could say to her, "Hey, I'm going to be in Korea. You want to meet up?" So pretty crazy. It's like a pretty desperate thing to do. And yeah, she ghosted him in the end, so it did not work out, which, it is obviously a completely delusional thing to even attempt. But hey, men are desperate these days, and this guy really wanted an Asian woman, apparently. And the other thing, he only knows this woman because he was paying her for tutoring. It's not like they even met on the dating app or anything. And I'm sure while he was over there, because he did go to Korea, and I'm sure while he was over there, he probably did use the dating apps while he was there. And who knows how much success he had, but I'm sure he did do that. So he probably wasn't having all his eggs in that one basket. I'm sure he was just kind of going over there to geomax in general. But still, yeah, a pretty crazy thing to do. And every time that my mom tells me anything about this guy, it's always like you can just hear the disgust in her voice. And she always ends up saying something vaguely racist, like she'll be like, "I just don't get it. I don't think they look good at all," talking about Asian women. And one thing that she always goes back to, she'll be like, "They eat dogs, right? I don't know how he could trust one of those women around his dog." But um, yeah. Anyways, so there is more to this story. So fast forward to more recently. So I guess this guy did eventually start dating a Chinese woman, and she lives around here, like in this area. So he didn't have to go to another country to meet her. Um, but I guess she was born in China, and she currently lives in the United States. I don't know how long she's been here, but they only dated for like maybe 6 months, and now they're married. And that's what my mom and my aunt were talking about a few weeks ago, because I guess the wedding just happened. And they were showing me pictures from the wedding. So the wedding was at a Chinese church in the bigger city near where we live. And something I noticed about the wedding, like my mom was just showing me pretty much every picture in the whole wedding album on the guy's Facebook. So I was looking at all the pictures, and there's pictures of pretty much every person in attendance, all the different couples and everything. And something I noticed, like I couldn't help but notice it. Almost every Asian female at this wedding that was part of a couple, the only ones that were with an Asian man were the older ones. Literally every Asian woman at this wedding under the age of 40 was with a white man, except for one, and she was with a Sikh, I think. The guys with the turbans and the long beards. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, it was just like looking at the wedding photos, you can't not see it. It's just very obvious. Oh, and by the way, the woman that this guy got married to, she wasn't too bad looking. And I actually asked my mom how old she was because I was curious. And apparently she's actually a year older than the guy. So she's like 39, I guess, maybe 40. And she's not fat. She's not like beautiful or anything. She's not a stunner, but she's not fat. And she has an okay face. She's not too wrinkly or anything. She's not really showing her age. I think she does look younger than she is. And as far as I know, she doesn't have any kids or anything. She's never been previously married. Although she may have been, I don't really know, but I think my mom probably would have mentioned that. So yeah, everything all worked out for this guy in the end. And if he had not been making a concerted effort to specifically seek out Asian women, he might not have found his current wife. And he might have even ended up with some fat, white, spherical, masculine woman instead. So, as ridiculous as it was, everything that this guy was doing, it all eventually worked out. It all worked out. When I was sitting in the living room with my mom and my aunt, and they're talking about this guy and the wedding and everything, they were just seething about it. Talking about if he was a real man, he would find an American woman. And just saying some nasty racist things that I'm not going to repeat here. And they were coping too. They weren't just mad, they were also coping about it. My aunt even did the whole thing where she said something about how men that like Asian women must be PDFs because Asian women look younger than they are. Or maybe it's because Asian women are, not obese. Either way, whatever the reason is, it's just such a ridiculous cope. Like in this particular case, the woman does look pretty good for her age, but she doesn't look like a teenager or anything. She's clearly an adult. She's clearly at least in her 30s. And she is literally older than the man. So calling him a PDF for being attracted to her is just nonsense. It's just completely nonsensical. And I'm pretty sure it's not just my mom and my aunt that think like this. It's pretty much every white woman in the country. They can't stand it. When they see a white man with an Asian woman, they can't stand it. Another thing they do, they always want to accuse the man, like saying his wife is just a mail order bride, or she's just with him for the green card, or she's just with him for the money, which, that's a really hypocritical criticism coming from American white women a group notorious for abusing alimony laws, meeting men off Tinder under false pretenses just so they can get a free meal, and any other form of gold diggery you can think of. White women are just as guilty of these things as any other race of woman. And I'm sure deep down everybody knows the truth. Like I said before, you don't need to see the actual data. You don't need to see any numbers. If you just exist in this world, in the United States, it's clear as day. Asian women are a lot less fat than white women on average. So it's a no-brainer why white men love them so much. White men love Asian women because they're more attractive, because they're not fat. It's like, it really is mind-boggling to see and hear the mental gymnastics that some white women like my mom and my aunt will partake in just to try and make it make sense in their seething, maulding brains why American men might prefer Asian women. And I don't doubt that plenty of white men do fetishize Asian women because they see them as submissive or whatever. That obviously happens, but I think all the fetishization or whatever you want to call it, that all comes after the fact that Asian women are the most attractive group. It's because Asian women are the most physically fit group that is the reason why men fetishize them. And another thing that I wanted to mention, white women are the most privileged group in society. Not just in the US, but on a global level, they are the most privileged. White women are living life like goddesses amongst mere mortals. And a feminine, in-shape white woman, or really even just like a slightly overweight white woman, she could be dog ugly in the face. But just because white women's status is so elevated, so high status, men all across the world will worship the ground she walks on, as long as she's not like hideously obese. But at least 40% of white women can't even meet that basic criteria. The only thing that, and it is the only thing that white women can do to negate their born privilege, is to keep drinking milkshakes from Starbucks every day and scarfing down Red Lobster Cheddar Bay biscuits like it's the main course. But so many of them, they can't even do that. In Asian culture, their idea of a dessert is like a red bean paste with a small amount of sugar sprinkled in. And it's no wonder that they are in such great shape compared to every other demographic. Because white women will eat 2 Krispy Kreme donuts for breakfast along with a milkshake that they call coffee, and then they wonder why they can't lose weight, it must be my thyroid. No, it's not your thyroid, you fucking porpoise. It's your insatiable appetite for high fructose corn syrup. I know white women aren't the only demographic that are molding over white men and Asian women's mutual love for each other. Asian men don't seem to like it much either, which makes sense because they really are the ones most impacted by it. And it could hardly be said that white women are suffering. But I'm just talking from personal experience because I have seen firsthand how white women react when they see a WMAF, white male, Asian female couple out and about. So I just thought I'd give my take on the matter.